One of my mentors likes to say, you can often take someone's 10,000 hours or 30 years of work or life's work and distill it down to, hours or a few days of reading. And as long as you apply that knowledge, then what it took them, like you said, you learn from it, you can put to use right away and have success. What advice would you give to those individuals that are trying to translate from, hey, I'm going through all this, but I'm not learning, or I'm not applying?
It's actually why I decided to write this book, Rise of the Reader, because people would say, hey, Nick, you're recommending these amazing books. Some of them would probably solve the problems that I'm currently facing. And so I read these books, I get all excited, but I fail to take action.
What is up, Impact Heroes? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rick Ornelas. Thank you for spending some time with us today, because we know time's a valuable resource and we're going to make it worth your while. I appreciate each and every one of you, not just for listening, but for who you are. I know you're sparking change to make the world a better place every day, and I am humbled and grateful for your efforts. It takes all of us doing our part to spread positive change, and that's what this show is all about. Motivating you with stories of struggle, courage, and hope to empower you to make a difference in your life and the lives of others.
In case you missed it,
it's so very important to understand that that little ant is a part of who you are, and it will stumble and it will fall. And no matter how many times you're going to say, I'm never going to do this again, that one time's going to sneak up again, and you will have to pick up and move up and say, it's normal.
Available everywhere you listen to your podcasts.
Welcome back, Impact Heroes. Today we have the super special episode, and I am super excited to speak to our latest iSpark Change social impact hero. That's a lot of S's. So our guest today has dedicated his life to helping millions of readers take action on the information they learn to rise to their potential. He's dynamic, informative, and enthusiastic as he shares the work of others to inspire and uplift his audience, which he learned at the young age of 20 when he discovered the world of personal development and quickly used the books he was reading to improve every aspect of his personal and professional life. I wish I had learned personal development at that age. His seven-figure digital marketing agency has worked with the likes of world-class authors such as Grant Cardone, Lewis Howes, and Alex Hormozy. And those are all individuals whose books I've read, by the way, and they're amazing. And he's connected me with many awesome guests for this show, including some of my most favorite interviews ever. He's the author of the soon-to-be bestseller, Rise of the Reader, Strategies for Mastering Your Reading Habits. Please welcome the inspiring, motivating, and super cool founder of Book Thinkers, Nick Hutchison. Nick, welcome to the iSpark Change podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, Rick. You're amazing. That was an awesome intro. Thank you for doing your due diligence, and excited to see what we talk about today.
Well, you're welcome. First off, you deserve it. And secondly, you wrote your story. I just shared it and added a little color there for the intro. But I have to say, I always take pride in honoring my guests with their intro, because I feel honored that they are on my show, that they chose to come on my podcast and devote some time to sit down and have a chat and share their heart and soul with our audience. So I respect that, and I want to give back to them.
Well, it sounds good coming from your lips. And yeah, when I decided to write the bio, obviously everything's true, but there are some of the things that I'm the most proud to talk about. So that's how I want to be represented, and I appreciate you taking the time to do it that way. Yeah,
absolutely. So Nick, we've known each other for a little bit. I think we met, what was it, last year? When
yes,
when you reached out, you had some people that you thought would be good guests for the podcast, and they have. People like Ken Rusk and just some awesome guests, and I really enjoyed that. And I said, it was funny because I said, yeah, I want to have you on the show, and you're like, yeah, well, there'll be a time for that. I'm working on something, and sure enough, now your book's out. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been in the works for years now, believe it or not. I have so much more respect for the author clients that we work with at Book Thinkers, because it is tough work to put out a book, as you know.
Yes, it is very difficult work. And I have to say, my first book, I don't want to say it was easy. However, the timing for me made it easy in that I was writing during the pandemic. I was in quarantine like everyone else. So I wrote consistently every day, minimum of like 1,000 words per day. And it, got it done in under 3 months. Now, it was 20 years in my brain in the making, but I wrote it. Now, the second one that I'm working on, with just launching a new business and everything, I honestly haven't written, I believe, since late February is the last time I've written. I'm about 4 or 5 chapters in, and I hit the brakes, shifted focus, and now I was just talking to actually a friend of both of ours, Kristen Butler, about getting motivated to start back up writing. So it is tough.
Yeah, the same thing sort of happened to me. As my business has been growing throughout the last few years, it would consistently fall in terms of priority on my priority list. And so there would be a month here to, a month every once in a while where I wouldn't get any work done on the book. And then some time would free up, or maybe I'd go on a little trip or something like that. And I have time by the pool and I'd get to work on it for a few days and make a big stride, as they say. And yeah, it's a tough process. Some people can do the 1,000 words every day, like you're talking about, and get a book done in a few months. And some people like me plan on doing that. And then it ends up taking you 3 years, like it's done for me.
Well, in any case, it's done. So, that's the important part. And, lots of readers are going to benefit from it. So we'll dive into that a little deeper. But I want to get to, why I wanted you on the show way back when, is because I see you as someone that spreads positive change. I see you as someone whose actions have a positive impact on others and humanity, and by that rationale makes the world a better place, someone that I call a social impact hero. So what I want to know, first question I ask everyone typically is, do you see yourself as a hero?
I do now, but I didn't up until recently. So when I was younger, late teens, early 20s, I dealt with a lot of ego that would oftentimes represent itself at the expense of other people. And so I wasn't known as somebody who was a hero, who focused on impact or service to others in that period of my life. As I started to change and evolve and grow book thinkers, I definitely became motivated by being of service to other people, by positively impacting the planet, putting out positive social media content, making book recommendations. And I was interviewing an author named Brant Menswar. He had a book called Black Sheep, Your 5 Non-Negotiable Values. And I went through my values as I saw them. And he said, what about impact? And I said, no, I don't know if I can buy that. And he said, everything you do, it bleeds impact. It's everything that you focus on. What do you mean? You're not willing to wear that as a non-negotiable? And ever since that podcast interview, I've been more open about it. And I've stepped into that hero mindset and mentality. And I do believe nowadays that I can, for the right person, embody that persona.
It's interesting you say that, Nick, because so when you did that interview, how old were you?
Right now I'm 29. That interview was probably 3 years ago. So I suppose I was 26.
Okay. So that's exactly what I was thinking. As someone in their mid-20s, I was nowhere near thinking of impact. Okay. And I wasn't, I didn't have a platform like I do now or with iSpark Change or anything. That wasn't even a thought, right? I was just thinking about, having fun and raising a family and all those typical things. And I would say that your generation is far different from my generation. I guess you'd be considered an older Gen Z or maybe a young millennial. I don't know where you fall, but you're kind of right in that range. But just, it's been my experience in, interacting, especially since iSpark Change, with a lot of, really great young individuals like yourself that have kind of progressed on that curve much quicker, have gotten to where, oh, wait, I can make an impact. I can change the world and make a difference, because, with social media and everything that's different from when I was your age, it's much easier to reach, so many people as you have, I'm sure it's millions, but would you say that maybe some of your youth or inexperience probably played a role in not really thinking that you were having an impact?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think without a doubt. I read a book called Built to Serve by Evan Carmichael, and he helps you articulate your purpose. One of my favorite lines from that book is that your purpose generally comes from your pain. And what he's trying to say is that most of us try to serve our younger self. And I think that's why I would say yes to the hero question, because when I look back at 19 or 20-year-old Nick, yes, I'm trying to serve that person. I'm trying to show them what they can do to become more fulfilled, to make progress, close the gap between where they are and who they want to be of service to others, give more often. And, I think that that version of myself, I'm not even sure if you would have listened to me, but I'm always trying to cater my messaging to people who aren't really in the world of personal development yet, because I know that I certainly wasn't up until I was. And I'm so happy that I became an interested reader and somebody who was curious about this kind of stuff. But yeah, I think ignorance is bliss sometimes when you're first starting as an entrepreneur or on social media. You don't really know where you're going. I mean, right now we do about 1 million impressions a month through the Book Thinkers channels. And if you would have told me that at that age, I would have said, no chance, you're lying. Impact was never part of the original mission or goal for Book Thinkers. And so, yeah, I think that a little bit of, immaturity and ignorance kind of played into that.
Yeah, one thing that I love in what you were sharing there, Nick, is the giving advice to your younger self. I know, someone we both follow, or I think him, Lewis Howes. He talks about giving advice to that younger self, and what would you want to tell that younger self? And I've often thought about that. What would my life have been like if I was able to get that younger self to listen? And I think, to your point, I don't think, knowing myself, I don't think I would have. I think there were so many experiences in life that I had to go through. You have to have that pain, like you were talking about. You have to go through those experiences to learn the life's lessons. You can read. Yes, I've read, hundreds or thousands of books like yourself, and you can learn a lot from those books and someone else's, hero's journey, if you will. Some of those things you have to learn along the way. So, and it sounds like you'd agree with that.
Yeah, I definitely do. One of the amazing things about these books is that sometimes they allow us to bypass the pain ourselves, because we can read about somebody else's pain, and then we can navigate a situation that might pop up more efficiently and sort of avoid the obstacle, or breeze through it with more certainty and less pain. But sometimes you definitely have to experience it yourself. So I'm totally on board with you. And I've learned the most through my failures, especially as an entrepreneur. I think every time I fail, I make progress and I get closer to my goal. And, that's one of my qualms with the US public education system sometimes, is that we're taught that failure is a problem, that you want to avoid failure at all costs. But in the real world, yeah, failure is where it's at. I mean, failure is my best teacher. I try to fail fast. I try to fail hard. And that's, I think, why I have the business that I have today, is because I fail a lot.
Yeah, Sam Walton used to say the one who makes the most mistakes wins, right? They're the ones that, as long as you learn from it. And I think, obviously that's the key, is that you have to learn from those mistakes and not continue to make the same. And yeah, I speak on that a lot, that failure is the best teacher you will ever have in life. And when I was, I probably knew that at 29, but, I didn't know that at 20. I was competitive. I had an ego, like you said, you did. I was, sports, and always wanted to win, and failure was just not an option. It was win, or, I had a temper. I'd be upset for for days,
yeah.
like all these kinds of things. And so it took a lot of maturity, that didn't come immediately, that took some time, and going through those failures. I would say that helped in the maturation process, is going through all those failures and then starting to go, no, maybe there is something to this. Maybe you can learn something. And that's where, my journey of personal development, it did start when I was young, like you, in like the sales, because I was in sales at that age. So in healthcare, so that side of personal development, and then more in terms of, my individual self as I got a little older. But you talk about how you found personal development at that age. So what was, I think you've told me this before, but I think it was a book, but what was it that got you started down that journey?
Oh, it's a great question. And just like you, it sort of started with sales. So I took an internship going into my senior year of college at a local software company, and it was a sales internship. And my boss at the time, the director of sales, introduced me to the world of podcasting, just like this, where a host would interview a guest and the guest would talk about what they did to find success, whatever that meant for them. And so I had about an hour commute to and from this internship each way. And so I would listen to podcasts, and over and over and over and over again on these shows, the guest would give credit to books. Now, I wasn't a reader at the time. Just like you, sports was my focus, and I had 3 younger brothers. And so everything was a competition, or at least I could make everything a competition. And I had a bad temper and I was very emotional. But as I was listening to these people talk about how books made them successful, I decided, okay, if I want to be like them, I should check out some of these books. So I went to a local Barnes and Noble with sort of my list in hand, and I got about 10 books in that first trip. Now, this internship, I had to clock in and be there for 8 hours every day, but I didn't really have 8 hours of responsibility, and I had a private office. So I would literally close the door and I would read for a couple hours a day. And the very first book that I decided to read was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And I'm so happy that I started with that book because, number one, it's only 200 pages long. Number two, it talks about something that most of us have some level of insecurity about, which is personal finance, financial literacy, money. It's a subject that is only taught at home, not at school. And so if you grow up in a poor and middle class family, like most people do, you're going to learn poor and middle class money habits. So as I was progressing through this book, the subject of financial management, personal finance, investing, I went from being shy and insecure on that subject to like leading conversations with friends and family. And so I just sort of thought, wow, if that's all it took, $20 in a few hours of my time, and I could overcome this huge issue in my life. I mean, I was a business student that didn't know anything about money. And so I would just totally disappear when that subject came up in the hallway or with friends and stuff, to leading those conversations. Like, what other areas of my life could I apply this magic of reading to? And so I just fell head over heels in love with the personal development space. And right after school, I'll kind of wrap up here. Sorry for the rant, but right after I graduated, I went full time as a software sales rep for this company. And so I devoured every sales, marketing, communication, persuasion, negotiation book that I could get my hands on, applied it to the role that I was in, and I was able to rise within that company very quickly and start to make a bunch of money as a result of books. So there was sort of a financial ROI on the early books that I was reading as well, which was really cool.
Yeah. And whatever the motivation is, right? Originally, hey, I want to be able to have a good conversation, and hey, this is helping me, make a living. I mean, whatever it takes, as long as it has a positive impact, I see, that motivation works. There's tons of different types of motivation. Whether, you start out with extrinsic and then it becomes more intrinsic, as it sounds like was the case for you. One thing that it reminds me of is, have you ever seen the movie Good Will Hunting?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So it's where he's talking, and I've seen that movie probably 20 years ago, but he's talking to those guys and they're like at Harvard or something, and they say
in the
whatever,
bar.
like,
Yeah,
in the bar. And he's like, oh, whatever you said you could get for, down at the public library, or, for $10. I forget the exact line, but you know what I'm talking about. And that was you, right? You're like, hey, from this book, I can distill all this knowledge. And like one of my mentors likes to say, you can often take someone's 10,000 hours or 30 years of work or life's work and distill it down to, hours or a few days of reading. And as long as you apply that knowledge, then what it took them, like you said, you learned from it, you can put to use right away and have success. So I have a question for you on that, because when I was younger, and I've seen this with a lot of people I coach, when I was younger, I read a lot of sales books. And then it almost became too much, and I wouldn't really apply the things that I had learned. And I know there's a lot of people out there, they're like, oh yeah, they read this, but then they never do anything with it. Or people in my space that will take coaching courses or do different things, and then they never apply it. And they just go from book to book to book, or course to course to course. So what was obviously you had some financial success, but what advice would you give to those individuals that are trying to translate from, hey, I'm going through all this, but I'm not learning, or I'm not applying?
Over the years of growing my Book Thinkers community, I've received hundreds of questions just like that. And it's actually why I decided to write this book, Rise of the Reader, because people would say, hey, Nick, you're recommending these amazing books. Some of them would probably solve the problems that I'm currently facing. And so I read these books, I get all excited, but I fail to take action. I don't know how to implement the information. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes shelf help instead of self-help, right? It just sits on your bookshelf, and maybe it was a little bit of entertainment. And so every time I would answer one of those people, I felt like I was leaving something on the table, like I was selling them short, because I knew I had much more to offer than a quick voice note or a couple of paragraph message. How am I implementing information? And it all started actually with this software sales position, because each time I would sell a software package to a transportation company, they would have to go through an implementation process that would take anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. And they'd have to practice the software, study the software, ask questions, collaborate with each other. There were help files. And so this implementation phase was something I started to apply to the books that I was reading. And until I started to write this book, I didn't realize that's what was happening. And so when I go back in time, I realized that I was doing some things that most people don't with the books they're reading. I was setting a very specific intention that was actionable for each book that I was reading. I was taking effective notes. I was differentiating between reading and taking notes. I was rewriting these notes because repetition leads to retention. I then built an accountability group with some of my more motivated friends, and we would meet on a weekly basis to talk about the books we were reading, what we were choosing to implement. And then each week we would plug these into an activity tracker that would measure our goals for the actions each week. And in that weekly meeting, we would talk about what worked, what didn't work. Are we keeping them in the trackers? How are these activities impacting us? Everything was measurable. And so I know I just spit a lot at you, but when I decided to write this book, I had to go back through my entire process and look at, what am I doing to translate information into action? And then the book itself is a couple hundred pages of that process. So I just knew that by typing a paragraph or sending a quick voice note, I was sort of under delivering compared to what I knew that I could be doing. Mm-hmm. And that's essentially why I decided to write the whole book. And I'll finish this rant with a funny story, which was that early in that software career, I was on a business trip with my boss. We were sitting at a bar in Chicago. And I remember him saying to me, hey, Nick, I see you reading all these books. You're making a lot of progress in your life. Like, what's that look like? And so I told him, I'm reading these books, taking notes, I'm applying the information. And he said something like, most people don't read books once they graduate college. Of those that do, a smaller percentage actually take notes. And of those that take notes, almost nobody really implements the information with an accountability group. So he was kind of like, hats off to you. And I'm like, well, why isn't everybody else doing this? Because it works so well.
Yeah, it's like, I believe it's Brendan Burchard when he talks in High Performance Habits, it's like performance mastery, where you can't just, like, to practice something, it doesn't work. You have to say, okay, I'm going to get a coach and I'm going to measure and track and, all the steps that you took. When you outline it like that, to me, I just think, duh, no wonder he's had success. No wonder he's been able to apply what he's learned. Not to discredit you, but to say that you're taking all the action that you need to take to make it productive, to translate it into success. And it and I don't mean to minimize it, because it's all amazing and it's a wonderful process. And I know a lot of people will benefit from reading, from reading your book and learning that process and hopefully putting it into action. Right. What I do want to emphasize for everyone listening is that process is available to anybody. That process is, while you created it and it works for you, anyone can apply that at any time. And not just with books, but like you did early on with podcasts, with YouTube videos. I mean, I fixed I fixed my dryer, a while back with a YouTube video. You can apply that stuff with anything. And I mean, it's almost, it seems so silly, but it's just translating your learning into action and taking the steps you need to take. But
you're right. And I don't feel like you're minimizing it at all. In fact, I think it is simple and it's doable. And that's what makes it fun. I think the easier something can be consumed, the more likely it will be consumed. The easier something can be acted on, the more likely it will be acted on. It's kind of like that metaphor, though, on the other side of the spectrum, where it's like, if it was easy, everyone could do it. It's simple, but it's not easy. Otherwise we would all have 6-pack abs and 5 houses and a yacht or whatever the case is. It does take a little bit of discipline. I think that, there's a little bit of, I talk in the book about delayed gratification. I talk about serving your future self. I talk about minimizing regrets, because you have to find something to create urgency in your present situation. Otherwise you'll default to the instant gratification dopamine hits like Netflix and social media instead of reading the books, because they don't always solve a problem same day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. So what are your typical reading habits? Do you read in the morning? Do you read at night? Do you read 10 times a day? I mean, when do you typically read?
I try to schedule 10 hours of reading time into my schedule each week. And most of the time, at a bare minimum, I'm doing 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening. So I'll share this, Rick, with your audience today. 15 minutes of reading for a beginning reader, that's about 10 pages. So if you can replace, people always say, I can't find the time to read. Well, let's replace some low impact activities like maybe Instagram in the morning, just 15 minutes with reading a good book. And maybe just the first 15 minutes of your evening Netflix or Hulu or HBO or whatever, just the first 15 minutes. That's 30 minutes a day. It's about 20 pages a day. If you could do that 5 days a week, that's 100 pages a week. And so 100 pages a week is a book every 2 or 2.5 weeks. You'll read over 20 books a year simply by planning 30 minutes and 30 minutes in the evening, 5 days a week. So with me, I definitely read more than that, but I think that's a good place to start. I really enjoy reading in the morning because it's such a highly prioritized activity for me. I want to make sure that I read when my energy is best. So I exercise in the morning. I come back home. I have the exercise endorphins flowing through my veins. I've got a good cup of coffee. That's the most ideal time for me to get the most reading done. And so that's when I'm kind of getting most of it done.
Again, it's a fantastic process. And thank you for breaking it down, because I think that will help individuals, because so many people, they think, they see a book and all they see is this, right? They see this fat and they're like, oh, forget it, right? And they don't read. And I mean, there's even people I've coached. I'm like, hey, just put it out there so you see it, right? It's like putting your running shoes out and your clothes out to go to the gym, like just put it out there. Just open the book, like Jim Quick says, just start by opening the book, and then you read a page, and then before you know it, hey, you read 10, or you read 15, or you read for 15 minutes, and we all have the same 1,440 minutes in the day, so you take about you got about 1,000 left after sleep. Everybody has the 30 minutes. I promise you. Anyone that says they don't, it's just time management and prioritization. Everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I love to say this to people. If I gave you $10,000 to read a book by next week, do you think you could do it? And everybody's like, I could read 10. It's a matter of prioritization. People don't value the books as much as they do the $10,000, but I do. And that's why I get it done. And here's a fun way to remember to read every morning and night. I like to say bookend your days. That's something I heard from Ed Milet. Nice. Bookend your days by reading in the morning and reading in the evening, because you're when you wake up first thing, maybe you get a little bit of exercise done and then you read, you'll have great energy. And we all want to avoid a little bit of blue light right before we go to bed. So it'd be great to shut the TV off. Maybe it's not the first 15 minutes of Netflix, maybe it's the last 15, but finish your day with reading. And if you can control the morning and you can control the evening, you're much more likely to control the middle of the day as well and be more productive.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I have my morning routines, my evening routines, just like I know you do, and they make a huge difference. And, I guarantee, one thing you said, it's kind of funny about if you gave someone $10,000, I guarantee from the books you've read that you've made a lot more than that from, reading these individual books and, what you've learned and what you put into action. So,
yeah. You know what? Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't be more true. And I was just joking around with somebody earlier today. Alex Hormozy just released his most recent book, $100 Million Leads. He had a big book launch for it. And his first book, $100 Million Offers, you can get the book for $20. Or I think it's even available for a couple dollars on Kindle.
I think it's 99 cents, the ebook.
Yeah. So that book, last year, I read it only about halfway through the year. It created an additional $100,000 in revenue for my business just in the first 6 months of applying it. And so talk about an ROI, not tens of thousands of dollars, over $100,000 in the first 6 months from one book.
Yeah.
And so blows my mind. I think it's the best ROI ever. And like you had mentioned earlier, you can condense decades into days. You can condense billions of dollars of information. Like you read Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. Apple's $1 trillion company. You can get the whole roadmap for $20. I mean, you're condensing trillions of dollars of education into $20. I mean,
I haven't phrased it that way, so that's a good one. I'll share that with others. So thank you for sharing that. I want to get back to one thing. You know, you and I could probably chat for a lot longer than we have time on this program, but I want to get back to one thing is how you shifted from, you know, what you were doing and your love of books into Book Thinkers, into actually saying, hey, I'm going to create something called Book Thinkers, and, you know, where that all came about. Because that speaks to part of, you know, what I like to call the hero's origin story of how you started really impacting others and, you know, really making a difference in the world.
Long story short, I started posting the books that I was reading on social media as a way to connect with like-minded people, as a way to encourage my friends and family to read, as a place for people to look at the books that I'm reading, my biggest takeaways from them. And also, the first idea for Book Thinkers was to build a mobile application that could help people retain more from the books they're reading. That didn't end up happening. But what did happen was that authors started to reach out on this Instagram platform where I was sharing my book recommendations and tell me, hey, Nick, your audience is my target reader, and I'd love to pay you for a book review. And in the back of my head, I thought, wow, I can get paid to read something I'm already doing for free. And so that was the first successful opportunity for monetization. And as I'm reading these business books about entrepreneurship and growing a business and stuff, you know, they would say, hey, a consultant should always ask somebody, hey, is there anything else that I can help with? And so I would ask authors, is there anything else that I can help with as far as book PR, book marketing, podcasting, social media? And I would try different things out, see if they could sell books for these authors. And I think that, you know, I didn't really realize this in hindsight, but whether I'm recommending the book or I'm helping the author get their book out more efficiently, the outcome is still the same, which is that the right book ends up in the right hands. And so I could do that more efficiently by helping authors behind the scenes produce better content. So kind of fast forward until today, Book Thinkers now has a full-time team of 8. We're a growing business, and we support over 100 authors a year in some type of paid capacity by helping them promote and market their books more efficiently. And I'm starting to realize now too that part of the mission of my business is to make social media a more positive and constructive place, because so much of the content out there is negative and divisive, fear-mongering, and I hate to see it. So I love to support people that are creating positive content just like you are for this community. And I love to support people who have something valuable to offer. You know, like we talked about, they've worked for decades to develop some specific set of skills. They've learned something really valuable, and they just want to share it with other people. And that's so cool to me.
Yeah, that is really, really cool. And I wish when my book came out in 2020, I wish I knew about, you know, Book Thinkers and well, I didn't really know much about marketing. It was just kind of figuring it out. But yeah, I'll do it differently when, you know, second follow-up book comes out for sure. And then we can talk about that. Then we can talk about marketing for my next book for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'll tell you what, man, like Book Thinkers as a business, it's full of people whose lives have also been transformed by the books that we've read. So everybody on the team is a big fan of personal development books, and it's a really cool environment. You know, I read early on in the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss that reality is negotiable and that everybody can design a life that's uniquely fulfilling to them. And he gives you some like a roadmap to follow to make that happen. And I've implemented all of it. And so, I can say this very confidently at 29. I love my life. I love positively impacting other people. I feel really fulfilled each and every day when I put my head on my pillow. I'm giving my best effort. I'm leaving it all on the table. I'm not going to regret this period of my life because it's purpose driven and it's positive and it feels really good. And it's a result of the books that I've read. Like, that's why I have what I have. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's the collective learnings and soup of everything. How many books would you say you've read? Do you know? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, so I started reading at 20. I'm 29 now, like we've talked about, I guess, a few times. I'm around 500, maybe 550. And so I've averaged 50 books a year, but I've reread some of them 10 times. So maybe closer to 1,000 if you include that.
Yeah, I tend to reread a lot of the ones that I like and even a lot of times not always the entire book, but certain chapters, certain sections, that I'll reread over and over again. I don't know if that's just that's what it takes for me to sink in, or just
repetition leads to retention, and so I think the better that you can understand the material and the more often you can revisit it, the more likely you are to implement it into your life, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you've listened to the show and for our audience, sometimes I go through the components of Hero because, honoring your purpose, I think you clearly do that. And you're obviously engaging your audience and your mission and you're reaching out to others and spreading that positive change, rippling that message out there and, opening your heart and being authentic and everything with us. I do want to ask, what's been the most challenging thing along the way since you started Book Thinkers? What's been the toughest thing that you've had to deal with, as an entrepreneur or business or yourself, in your journey?
I think patience has been the hardest thing for me. Early in the process of starting Book Thinkers, I wanted to go full-time with it prematurely. I was working that full-time software job. Book Thinkers was a side hustle. I was way more passionate about the side hustle than I was my full-time work. And I was about to make the jump. And I remember meeting with somebody who I still meet with today. His name's Kevin Horsley. He's the author of a book called Unlimited Memory. He's a great guy, and he acts sort of as a business coach for me. And I remember him saying, "Hey, Nick, the reason that 95% of small businesses fail," which is something that Michael Gerber highlights in the E-Myth Revisited, he says the reason that these businesses fail is because the entrepreneurs make that jump too early. They don't have a nest egg. They don't have an emergency fund. And so too early in their business, they start to compromise on values. They start to discount services. They act from a place of scarcity, and it bleeds into the business. It bleeds into their sales calls. It bleeds into the product that they're fulfilling or the service they're fulfilling. You don't want to do that. He said, don't jump off the cliff and try to build the parachute on the way down. Stick around with your full-time job, build the parachute, and then jump. It's a much better journey down. And so that's what I decided to do. And I think the hardest thing was patience. I made a bunch of big attempts at big deals that never really worked out. But what did work out was slowly growing the business, slowly adding new services, collecting feedback, making small iterations. And it goes back to one of my favorite books, The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, that small steps in the right direction over a long period of time will lead to exponential progression, will compound positively for you, but it just takes a long time. And I say long time, but it was a long time for me because I grew up in this social media generation, like you talk about. I think I'm a young millennial and everybody just wants everything yesterday. It's instant gratification. It's so tough.
Yeah, it's tough. Hey, it's tough for you. It's tough, for me at the age of 52. I mean, it's tough for all of us because that's the world in which we live, where, it paints this picture of, oh, you can have the 6-pack abs if you buy this, shock machine or whatever, right? Instead of doing your, sit-ups and cleaning up your diet. And people don't want to put in the work, but there are, I think that's changing. I think that is shifting, generationally. There's a lot of people, especially post-pandemic, I think that helped with, across generations, but I think younger generations like yourself, they are more willing to there are people that are willing to put in the work. At least that's what I've seen. Yes, there are everybody that want to snap their fingers and, I'm going to be a millionaire, tomorrow. But yeah, when you do it the slow way, when you do it what I consider the right way, that's where you have the longevity, as I've seen, over my career. The ones that, I was a part of 2 startups that we shot up to, 8 figures in under 2 years, only to come crashing down with both of them. And so very quickly. And so when you put in that long, that compound effect, that's where you're going to reap the rewards. So you're doing it the right way. Just know that from a coach, a fellow coach, that you're doing it the right way. Keep that up and you'll continue to have lots of success. Yeah,
I appreciate that. And for anybody listening, I hope they take that into consideration if they're thinking about starting business as well. The side hustle is a great place to try things out, and it's not super risky financially. And, funny enough, people might find this interesting. BookThinkers had full-time employees before I left my full-time job. So I had hired people full-time before I was willing to go full-time with it. That's how slow I went.
Yeah, that is super. That is very, very interesting. And I think that hammers the point of what you were saying. So I know the audience will appreciate that. Well, as I said, a while back, you and I could probably talk for a couple hours, but, we want to respect the audience and their, time devoting to listen to the show. So I do want to ask a question that I always ask on the show, because I may get an interesting answer from you. I'm expecting, something pretty interesting. So one of the things we talk about on this podcast is what we've coined as a spark moment. And that's a moment where our actions or someone else's actions have a ripple effect that goes far beyond the initial act. So maybe it's, the teacher that told you to change majors, or maybe it's the, the friend that interacted, or like you said, the mentor that told you to take your time, or something that you did for someone else. So share a story of a spark moment that you've had in your life that as you've moved past it, now you've seen that ripple effect and the positive impact that it had.
I'll bring up something that happened sort of recently, so here's the story. I'm at Steven Pressfield's house. Steven Pressfield is the author of The War of Art, as well as a number of other bestsellers. He's a legend in the personal development space. And he was talking about how he's very superstitious. He always looks for omens and signs. And he said that when he was younger, whenever he would find a penny that was heads up, that means it was going to be the best day ever. It means that everything would work out in his favor. He might get a book deal, whatever the case is. A penny being heads up was a big deal for him. So around the same time that he told me that story, I had a big decision to make, which was BookThinkers is growing. I have a few full-time employees. I don't know if I can make the jump yet. And so I was contemplating that all day. Throughout that day, we also got to work with some other really cool people, including Lewis Howes, a poet named, and a few other podcasters. So it was a wonderful day. And I just thought, man, if I could do this full time for the rest of my life, I'd be very happy. And so it had been about 12 hours since the Steven Pressfield conversation. And I forgot about the penny story. But I'm walking around with Luke, who is full-time at BookThinkers, and he's sort of like our COO. And I was telling him, look, I need a sign to go full-time with the business. I need something to push me over the edge. And at that exact moment, we look down and there's a penny on the ground, heads up. And so what's funny about this, to make it even better, is that this was our 3rd loop around the same walking area, and we hadn't noticed the penny before. So magically, as I say these words, and he can tell you the same story, I find this penny and I decide to leave that full-time position, which I had automated down to just a couple hours a day, but I decided to leave the next day. And it had given me the courage. Steven Pressfield telling me about his experience with pennies kind of gave me the courage to make that jump myself. And what's very funny, to kind of wrap up this ripple effect moment, is that the very next month, our revenue at BookThinkers doubled. And it wasn't because of any additional effort into the top end of the funnel. It was sort of, from my perspective, like a karmic reward for finally being courageous enough to take this jump, and sort of a pat on the back, like, hey, this was the right time for you to do it. And so I waited years and years and years. I finally had that moment. And then here we are now, like I said, impacting 1 million people a month as a result of that Stephen Pressfield kind of initial penny metaphor. So
very cool story. Thank you so much for sharing it. I had that feeling that it was going to be an interesting one, and you gave exactly what I thought you would give, is, something unique, something different, something that is definitely an example of a ripple effect that's going to continue, far and wide. And, we'll just keep growing and growing. It's 1 million, per month now, but soon it'll be 2, and then 5, and then 10, or, whatever it is. Well, that's fantastic. So our audience is, I know those that aren't familiar are going to want to learn more. So where's the best place for them to connect with you? Just all of those will be in the show notes, but if you can share it too.
Sure. Bookthinkers.com. That's our website. You can learn more about us there. Or Bookthinkers on Instagram. That's our most active and sort of vibrant community on social media. And I'll throw something out for your audience today. If anybody is dealing with a problem that they just simply cannot overcome, or they're looking to improve a skill and they don't know how to improve it, reach out to Bookthinkers. Tell me the situation via Instagram DM. I might go back and forth with you a little bit, and I'll provide a book recommendation that I think can help solve that problem or can help you double down on that skill that you're looking to improve. I love playing like book matchmaker and recommending good books that can improve somebody's life. That's my purpose. That's why I'm here. That's why I exist, and nothing makes me happier. There was another ripple effect story that I was thinking of telling. The short version is that I met up with a follower of Bookthinkers in Croatia this year when I was on my honeymoon by accident. I walked into a restaurant, asked to make a reservation. The guy goes, sure. Then he looks up and he goes, by the way, I'm a big fan. I'm like, he has no idea who I am. And he goes, I was like, of what? And he goes, Bookthinkers. And we're at this tiny little village in Croatia. And he told me about all of the book recommendations that he's read as a result of our page and our community and implemented, and how it's improved his life dramatically thus far. And he went into super detail on it. So I know it was true. And, these book recommendations can make a big difference. So like I said, I guess to sum it up, if somebody's struggling with something, feel free to reach out and I'll do my best to provide a good book recommendation.
Well, that is an amazing offer. Thank you very much. And I know you will respond. So thank you in advance for our listeners. And I hope, audience, that you do take him up on that, because he's a very well-read individual. And so I'm sure Nick will have awesome recommendations for any of you. I may have to send you some challenges or issues and see what your recommendations are. So fantastic. And yes, that definitely qualifies as a spark moment, and that will continue. That's another one that's just going to continue. And, we'll have to do a follow-up and see maybe when you're coming out with your next book, we'll have to do a follow-up and see what some of those ripple effects are, what some of the stories. It'd be great if you went back to Croatia and, seen everything or heard from, everything that has changed in this individual's life, down the road.
Yeah, man. Well, hey, thank you for hosting an amazing podcast. Thank you for being you, asking great questions, following your curiosity. I know that you're making a positive difference in the lives of so many people, and you've got other cool projects that we've talked about offline. So yeah, just, this world has so much potential for all of us, and I'm just happy to see another person fighting the good fight.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Really, really means a lot. Thank you, Nick. So on that note, I want to ask our final question it's a perfect segue. You gave me a perfect segue to our final question, if you didn't realize that. But our goal at iSpark Change is to positively impact 1 billion people over the next few years through our community and our future social impact platform. And we can't do it alone. We need the help of impactful leaders like yourself to show others the way, because many people feel, as I once did, that they're too small, they don't have an impact, that they don't make a difference. So I value your thoughts and opinions as a social impact hero and leader. So I want you to peer into the future, peer into our iSpark Change crystal ball, and tell us, what can the world become if everyone were to start translating that reading into action and believe that they can impact their future and our future?
Just a more positive place. I live a life of joy because I've found what fulfills me and because I am of service to other people. And everybody can live that way. Far too many people die with regrets. They live lives based on other people's expectations of them instead of their own. But we can use these books and these podcasts to design lives that are fulfilling to us and to live those lives and to be of service to other people, be positive and grateful for the fact that we are alive and we have breath. And yeah, it's a fulfilling place, man. It's a fulfilling place.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. It will come. It will come. It just takes time from people like us.
Yeah. It's compounding. Yeah.
Yes, it's compounding. It is. There you go. Well, Nick, thank you for taking time to share your heart and wisdom with our audience. You came in, you over-delivered as I knew you would. Your passion, integrity, and impact are evident. You're humble and you lead with a heart of service and gratitude, which tells me you're going to continue to have success in all facets of life. And this is only the beginning of your social impact.
Thank you.
All right, Impact Heroes, it's our stories that connect us all, and we loved hearing Nick's today. Nick Hutchison, you're not only an inspiring and amazing human being, but you truly are an iSpark Change social impact hero. We'll see you all next time.
Do you want Rick to speak at your event? Here's what others have to say.
Did not know his story, and it was so inspirational, and his presence on stage, his authenticity was just incredible.
Absolutely loved his performance. It made me feel some type of way.
If you're looking for a speaker for your next event, hire Rick. I promise you this, you will not be disappointed.
Visit rickcornelis.com to book him today.
Remember, Impact Heroes, every positive action can be a spark moment that has a ripple effect that spreads far beyond the initial act. So go out there and spark change. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, then please smash that 5-star rating on iTunes or Spotify and leave a review. We value your comments and we want to hear from you in the community. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and we'll see you next week on the iSpark Change podcast.